From Indianapolis, with an eye on every corner of the state, this is IBJ Media's Inside Indiana Business with Gerry Dick. Presented by Elevate Ventures, Ice Miller, and Indiana University.
Man had his crap, but then his number came up and he was gone with the draft. He's in the army now, a blowing reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B.
That was then, this is now. The dramatic transformation of Fort Benjamin Harrison, from a key base during World War II to a booming live-work-play destination in central Indiana. Plus, IUPUI is setting the tone in a growing world of music therapy. And
I'm looking at this board that was always in our locker room of the goals for the game, and I'm just looking at it, and honest to God, Gerry, whack! Right on the side of the head.
Dan Dockage Unplugged. The story of who knocked him in the noggin, how it brought him to IU, and his undying love for basketball.
Hello and welcome to Inside Indiana Business. I'm Gerry Dick, coming to you this week from Fort Harrison on the city's northeast side. Actually, this is the city of Lawrence, and for those of you around the state of Indiana, this is in northeast Marion County, about 15 miles northeast of downtown Indianapolis. This is a place with lots of history. It dates back to 1903, when funds were authorized to purchase the land for a U.S. Army base. In 1906, it was officially named after Indiana's own 23rd President of the United States. And it was a busy place in both World Wars I and II. In fact, in 1943, Fort Harrison was the largest draft inductee center in the United States. But the 1991 Base Realignment and Closure Commission recommended that Fort Benjamin Harrison close. And despite the efforts of state and local officials who tried to keep it open, Fort Harrison officially closed in September of 1996. Nearly 1,100 civilians lost their jobs. But it marked the start of a transformation here, from military base to live, work, and play destination. In just the past 5 years, there's been more than $200 million in investment here. Nearly 300 single and multifamily homes, with 250 luxury apartments on the way. A new Hilton True Hotel. A $2 million civic plaza. There's a YMCA. A new Marion County Public Library will open in June. There's been substantial development around restaurants and retail, all in the shadow of a championship golf course and Fort Harrison State Park. Inside now, the Starrett Center, the new home of Heartland Film, which is also part of an emerging cultural campus here at Fort Harrison. Pleased to be joined by Lawrence Mayor Steve Collier. And Mayor, a lot to talk about here. First of all, the Heartland announcement. I know next week this will be christened, if you will, but the addition of Heartland Film as part of this cultural campus, really important part of this kind of live, work, play area.
Very much a great announcement to be able to make, because it sort of was a surprise when it came out here. We really weren't recruiting them, but we went out there and once we knew they were looking for a new place, we thought what a perfect place for it to be out here. We had spent some money on kind of renovating the Starrett Center beforehand, so when they came out and they made the decision to move out here, that was a big thing for us. It kind of marries very well with the theater at the Fort Theater and the cultural campus. It's creating certainly an environment for certainly culture and art and that kind of history for the city.
A lot of development here we'll talk about in a moment, and the economic impact to be sure. But you were teaching back in the 90s here when the announcement came down, and I was reporting at the time that the fort was going to close. And as a native, you've lived here for a long time. What was that like when that news came out?
Well, it was pretty scary, actually, because those of us who were teaching at the time, we just opened up a second high school not long before that, and so the city was on the cusp of being to grow. The fort had been such an integral part of the city of Lawrence. Lawrence grew up around, Fort Harrison. It had been here since the turn of the century. So when we heard it was going to close down, we were thinking to ourselves, okay, what's next? How do we replace that? And so I'm happy to say that once the FHRA was formed, we began to take strides to be able to truly reuse what was very much a legacy part of the city.
Yeah, I remember some wondered, would this ever be redeveloped? And it certainly has been. You look in just the last 5 years, $200+ million of investment. And, you know, I mentioned in the introduction, so many kinds of investment and developments, residential, there's a new hotel, library, YMCA. Kind of put a bottom line on it. What's the impact of this transformation?
Yeah,
for
so actually, I think we've begun to realize this is going to become the new downtown of the city of Lawrence. And so we've worked very hard to make that happen. A lot of the things that come and a lot of the investment in the city certainly provides a type opportunity for people to come in here and to settle. During the pandemic, we went about intentionally making sure and participating in our restaurants that grew up, our locally owned restaurants that grew up. All of those things were happening, and that began to attract even bigger and greater investments. The one that maybe we'll talk about here shortly is the Keystone. Will be the biggest investment we've ever had in the city of Lawrence, but that'll be joined right next to the library. So those two things alone kind of created what I think is going to be truly, like you said, a transformational downtown.
The Keystone project, $70 million.
Yeah, $70 million.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And this, again, when you talk about live, work, play, and this development here in the city of Lawrence is being held up. So many base remakes, if you will, around the country. This is being held up as an example.
Yeah, we're very proud of the fact that we are actually being, across the nation, we're being held up as this is how a reuse of a government installation should be done. And ours was slow in happening, as so many of them do. But once we got that kind of synergy going, we began to see a lot of economic, people with economic development on their mind wanting to come to Lawrence and talk with them. It was for me, it was a great situation, a great experience to be able to bring in people who had a lot of money and who wanted to put it in the city of Lawrence. That was a big deal for us.
What's next? I know a lot of talk about a new center of the city, really, but as you look going forward, I know you're not running for re-election, right? You'll be out of office. What's next here for Lawrence?
I think that the biggest thing that we'll see happening is we've got the Keystone project going in. We'll put a parking garage in. We've got one more lot that we're going to be pretty picky about what goes in there. I think that there is some interest in maybe putting a medical facility out here that will go along with the number of veterans that we have out here. We still have a military presence out here. We have a couple of the armories and certainly the commissary. So we'll never lose that. But I do think that as the city continues to grow and mature, is that we'll see a growth and kind of we've got all the apartments built that we want to have. We've got all the houses we need to have in the city center. Now we'll begin to see some truly transformational work in terms of having this cultural center here, in terms of having the Civic Plaza, all the events that we'll host. We're going to be bringing people in, hopefully, from throughout Marion County and throughout central Indiana.
All right, Lawrence Mayor Steve Collier. Mayor, thanks for joining us. We'll look forward to continuing to follow the story of a very much changing area here. Thanks for joining us.
We appreciate you coming out.
All right. Well, growth opportunities here mean more employment opportunities as well. And a new way to get those workers to those jobs, well, the $188 million Purple Line, Indigo's newest mode of rapid bus transit. The route from Ivy Tech in downtown Indianapolis to just south of here at Fort Harrison, under construction for almost a year now, expected to be ready to roll by the end of 2024. And coming up next, why Southern Indiana isn't letting the grass grow under its feet, how more than 60 miles of an old railroad line could be a key driver in moving the economic needle forward there.
Here's what's making news around Indiana, brought to you by the Indiana Association of Realtors, Indiana's 21,000 realtors, the neighbors you know, the experts you can count on.
The late 1800s, when trains were the primary mover of people and cargo along tracks like the Monon Trail in Indiana. Well, certainly that mode of transportation changed dramatically when Americans got behind the wheel of the automobile. But what comes around goes around. In this case, old rail lines getting new life, and communities around the state reaping some of the benefits. Around Indiana reporter Mary Rachel Redmond is along the Monon Trail here in Marion County with more on that story. Mary Rachel.
Well, Gerry, the Monon Trail in Indy stretches 10 miles and beyond into Hamilton County. And believe it or not, when the trail debuted in '96, let's just say it had less than a lukewarm reception. But more than 25 years on, the Monon Trail has become a big draw and a key piece to the community. This 10-mile stretch alone attracts over 1.3 million walkers, runners, and bikers a year. And now folks from 5 counties in southern Indiana will soon have a Monon of their own.
Oh, up and down the Monon, everything is fine, 'cause that rootin' Monon, she's a Hoosier line. Oh.
The historic Monon Railroad can trace its roots all the way back to New Albany in 1847. The Hoosier line would come to define an era. But times change. After sitting idle for nearly 2 decades, plans are now underway to revive this abandoned stretch of Monon Rail into the state's longest trail.
Here you have one contiguous trail that will link 5 counties and half a dozen or more communities. So it was just a no-brainer of trying to pursue it. The Next Level Trails program that Governor Holcomb has instituted, I mean, this was tailor-made for it. And you've got over 62 miles there, going through some really, from a natural resources perspective, some pretty areas.
Once the project is complete, Bortner says he thinks the Monon South Trail will become a destination location and a major economic driver in the region.
This is going to be a national story. This is a big deal. It's something that's really kind of a dream come true to actually get it finalized and getting ready to go.
Since the Next Level Trails program launched in 2018, DNR has awarded close to $120 million to create trails all across Indiana. And that might not be the end of the line. Governor Eric Holcomb is asking the legislature for an additional $50 million to continue connecting Hoosier communities through trails, all part of that live, work, play economic development strategy. Gerry?
All right, Mary Rachel, thank you. Indeed, economic development projects, quality of life projects driving big dollars around the state of Indiana. Elsewhere around Indiana, in northern Indiana, Mishawaka-based Damon Products expanding operations and adding what it calls a significant number of jobs. Damon designs and manufactures hydraulic valve manifolds used in heavy industry. A new nonprofit in Bloomington will focus on advancing initiatives related to the arts, technology, and jobs and housing. The City of Bloomington Capital Improvements, Inc., or CBCI, will oversee multiple projects involving city ownership of land and buildings. In Fort Wayne, big changes for the Northeast Indiana Innovation Center. It is now doing business as the Northeast Indiana Innovation Collective. The mission, a new collaborative plan to support entrepreneurship for everyone and support for all types of ventures. The NIC will be guided by President and CEO Mike Frisch. Coming up next, Indiana Secretary of Education shares her top priorities for Hoosier students and the healing power of music. How IUPUI is taking the lead in the emerging field of music therapy. I'll be back in studio with more right after this. It's time now for Eye on Education. Well, bumping up funding for Indiana students, one of Governor Eric Holcomb's top priorities as state lawmakers work on crafting a new 2-year budget. A year of opportunity. That's how Secretary of Education Katie Jenner sees 2023 for K-12 education in the state. Jenner will be spending a lot of time at the General Assembly, where lawmakers are considering the Holcomb administration's request for $1.2 billion in K-12 funding, including money to increase teacher pay and eliminate textbook and curriculum fees. Jenner says funding will also address what she calls a critical need for Indiana education: literacy.
In Indiana, we actually have been seeing a declining literacy rate since the school year 2012-2013. COVID further exacerbated that. So we must do everything we can to make sure our teachers have the top training in science of reading strategies. We need to, and by the way, thank you to Lilly Endowment. We were able to announce in August the largest investment in literacy in Indiana's history. So it is so important that we stay laser focused on making sure all of our children can read.
Jenner also tells me K-12 education will increasingly engage in efforts to grow the state's talent pipeline. Just partnerships with the private sector, like one in Evansville, are key.
They have a program in partnership with Toyota right there in Bosse High School, where Toyota industry leaders come in and work directly with students on skill development and, making sure that they know you have to have good communication beyond just TikTok. You have to be able to connect. You also have to be able to work well with others. It's that common skill development that is really our workforce, and partnering with them, we can best serve kids to build those skills.
Well, speaking of building skills, a $3.5 million grant from Lilly Endowment will help Rose Holman expand its Ask Rose Homework Help hotline. The money will help even more middle and high school students with their math and science homework. Ask Rose will hire bilingual students to create dedicated Spanish-speaking tutoring hours and pilot the concept with 2 schools. The tutors are available via a video, telephone call, email, or chat 5 nights a week. Well, the IU School of Medicine turning up the volume on the healing power of music. Business of Health reporter Kylie Valletta here with more. Kylie.
Thank you, Gary. For the first time, the IU School of Medicine is dedicating a leader to focus solely on music therapy. And nearby on a different campus, IUPUI is now the first in the state to launch a PhD program in music therapy. At the IU School of Medicine, the efforts focus on how music can help patients with cancer. The school recently appointed nationally renowned music researcher Dr. Gerry as a Walther Professor of Supportive Oncology. Rob learned about the power of music from a very young age. Her mom was the organist at their church, and she remembers sitting at the organ with her and in the loft with the church choir. Her research focuses on young children with cancer and their parents. Studies show parents' emotional distress impacts the child, so music therapy also benefits mom and dad.
They're having this shift in their thinking, this cognitive shift of, oh my gosh, they're doing okay, or they get relief. I think of it as like a pressure cooker. So like you feel this pressure building up in your body because you're so concerned about how is my child doing? Are they going to be okay? And then they begin to play and they get a glimpse of that normal little 4-year-old doing what 4-year-olds do, smiling and laughing. And that pressure cooker release goes off and it releases some steam.
There is growing demand for music therapists in general, which is why just down the street at IUPUI, a music therapy PhD program is now underway with its first students this semester.
Right, Kylie, IUPUI, 2 programs, are they going to collaborate?
They think they will collaborate some, and they'll overlap a little bit and work together. Interesting, IU focuses on cancer with music therapy. IUPUI is covering all disorders with this music therapy. And a big emphasis at IUPUI is on technology. They say you can do things now in music therapy that were impossible just a couple years ago.
Very interesting. Thanks, Kylie, as always.
Yep.
Well, next, the one and only Dan Dockage, when his dad finally put up a basketball goal in the driveway.
I sprinted into the house, grabbed my ball because I wanted to make the first shot before my dumb brother did.
Wisecracks about his older brother falling in love with basketball and the time Bob Knight whacked him in the head. More Dockage doozies when we come back. And find out the game plan for another Hoosier Hoops legend. Dave Lindquist catches up with Tamika Catchings in this week's IBJ, why she's expanding her restaurant business and her dreams of building a new basketball gym in Indianapolis. More on that story. Scan the QR code there to find out additional headlines for the week as well. Well, after more than 20 years in the healthcare industry, Amy Brown made the decision to go out on her own in 2018. And this week, still more validation for that decision as Indianapolis-based Authentics landed $20 million in venture funding. Brown describes Authentics as a conversational intelligence software platform using AI to gather millions of conversations between consumers and healthcare and insurance companies.
And the whole point of doing that is for leaders to be better informed using the data they already have about what things are creating customer friction, where the problems lie within their processes or the communications, where they need to train their personnel better, and really leverage a data source that has often been stored but typically ignored by C-suite leaders and others as a insight center for their organization. So that's what we're using proceeds from this round for our sales and marketing efforts to make sure that we're seen, known in the industries we serve. And it's also going to mean really scaling out our product innovation team and specifically our machine learning engineers and data scientists.
Authentics has now raised a total of more than $28 million since its launch in 2018. Well, he pulls no punches, calls it like he sees it, and doesn't mind what chaos it creates. Former IU basketball star and current sports media personality Dan Dockage, my 100th guest on the Business and Beyond podcast. He shared so many great stories, we decided to split our conversation into two parts. In the second half with Dockage, why he chose hoops over baseball, his obsession with his first basketball goal, and what happened on that first recruiting trip to IU.
And I'm looking at this board that was always in our locker room of the goals for the game. And I'm just looking at it, and honest to God, Gary, whack, right on the side of the head. And I turned around and I'm like, I thought it was my brother, right? So I turned around, kind of had my fist like, what the are you doing?
Yeah.
And I turned around, it's Coach Knight. He goes, hey, Danny, you gonna come play here at Indiana or what? And I looked at my dad and he goes, I don't know. Yeah. And I go, Coach, are you giving me a scholarship?
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah, you dumbass. What'd you think I was talking about, being a walk-on? I fell in love, in love with basketball. You know, people talk about your first love and, it might be some girl or mine. I would sit in class and I couldn't wait to go shoot hoops by myself on this court that was this big. I couldn't wait. We didn't have a big driveway, little driveway. I sprinted into the house, grabbed my ball because I wanted to make the first shot before my dumb brother did. I wanted the first bucket. He wasn't even thinking about it. He was thinking about girls or school. I'm thinking, I got to make the first shot on this damn basket. And then I had to make the last shot when we sold it in like 1987. My mother will tell you, I'm incredibly shy and incredibly sensitive about certain things. But that basketball court, man, that little radio, it wasn't even 15 feet deep. If you shot from the corner, it was literally 4 feet each side. I didn't care. I was beating Gary Roosevelt. I was beating Gary Westside. I was kicking the hell out of Maryville on that court 1,000 times. And you know what? It got me to Indiana.
And you can catch the second half with Dan Dockage, marking our 100th episode, beginning Monday at InsideIndianaBusiness.com. Thanks for joining us. I'm Gerry Dick. Go out and make it a successful week.